Ramon and Clarisse Dela Cruz looked like the perfect newlyweds, smiling in wedding photos, holding hands under the Sydney sun, but within days of their honeymoon, one would be dead and the other exposed as a cold-blooded killer. Ramon Dela Cruz had always been the kind of man people admired. With his polished manners, well-spoken charm, and respectable career as a civil engineer, he appeared to have everything a young Filipino man could hope for. When he met Clarisse Mendoza, a beautiful and compassionate nurse working at a private hospital in Quezon City, he believed his life was complete. Clarisse was loved by everyone around her for her kindness and soft-spoken nature. She dreamed of working overseas and building a better life for her parents. Their love story, which began during a medical charity project, blossomed quickly, leading to an engagement that captured the attention of both their families and friends. The wedding was grand, held in an elegant church with more than 200 guests. Every detail reflected perfection. The fresh white roses, the gold-trimmed cake, the slow music that filled the air as Clarisse walked down the aisle. To the world, they looked like the perfect couple. But beneath Ramon's smile was a man burdened by something he could not share. He had taken massive loans to finance their luxurious wedding, hoping it would impress Clarisse's family and boost his social standing. What started as a dream of love was already tainted by deception and pride. As the confetti settled and the newlyweds kissed under the lights, Clarisse's eyes sparkled with hope. She believed she was stepping into a new chapter of her life filled with love and adventure. Their honeymoon destination was Australia, Clarisse's dream country, where she hoped to apply for a nursing job in the future. It felt like fate to her. For Ramon, however, it was a chance to start hiding his growing financial problems behind the illusion of a happy marriage. When they landed in Sydney, everything seemed magical at first. The city's skyline gleamed under the morning sun, and the couple took dozens of photos, smiling on the ferry rides, exploring Bondi Beach, and dining at waterfront restaurants. Clarisse posted about their journey online, writing captions that overflowed with love. Her friends and family flooded the comments with congratulations and heart emojis. But as the honeymoon unfolded, subtle cracks began to form. Ramon's cheerful nature slowly faded. He grew restless and irritable, often spending time on his phone late at night, whispering during mysterious calls that Clarisse couldn't help but notice. On the third night, she questioned his distant behavior. Ramon brushed it off with excuses about work, but the truth was darker. Loan collectors back in Manila were threatening him, demanding repayment. Every message he received brought new waves of anxiety. He had imagined that marriage to Clarisse would bring stability, perhaps financial support from her future nursing income abroad, but she was focused on saving, not spending. She didn't know about the debts, and Ramon intended to keep it that way. As the days went by, their laughter turned into strained silences. Clarisse tried to mend the mood, planning little outings and cooking simple meals in their hotel suite. But Ramon's temper grew unpredictable. One evening, a neighbor in the next room reported hearing something fall, a loud thud followed by muffled voices. Hotel staff checked in the next morning, and Ramon smiled politely, insisting everything was fine. No one thought much of it. Clarisse wrote one last entry in her travel journal that night. She mentioned how tired Ramon seemed, but added that she believed the honeymoon would bring them closer. It was a line filled with innocent hope, unaware that her trust in the man she had married would soon lead to her end. From the outside, their honeymoon continued to appear picture-perfect. Photos of sunsets, wine glasses, and affectionate captions painted a false image of bliss. But behind the camera lens, tension was building like a storm ready to break. Ramon's debts, pride, and fear began to twist his mind into darker places. What was meant to be the most romantic time of their lives had turned into a silent battlefield. By the fourth night, a change settled over Ramon. He stopped smiling altogether. His eyes, once filled with warmth, carried a cold stillness. He barely spoke to Clarisse during dinner, staring into the distance as though lost in thought. She tried to reach for his hand, but he quietly pulled away. To her, it felt like emotional distance. To him, it was the calm before the violence he was already planning in his mind. That night, as the city lights reflected off the harbor waters outside their window, Clarisse fell asleep dreaming of love, while Ramon lay awake staring at the ceiling, calculating his next move. The perfect honeymoon had become a ticking clock, counting down to the unimaginable. The sun rose over Sydney in a wash of orange and gold on the morning of the tragedy. Clarisse woke early, humming softly as she packed her small backpack. She was excited about the day's plan, A road trip to the Blue Mountains. She had read about the scenic cliffs, waterfalls, and walking trails and couldn't wait to explore them. She believed it would be the perfect way to reconnect with Ramon after the tense mood of the last few days. Ramon, however, moved like a man haunted by shadows. He responded to her cheerful chatter with short answers, his thoughts elsewhere, his mind heavy with what he had already decided to do. Before leaving the hotel, Ramon made an excuse to run an errand. He told Clarisse to wait for him in the lobby while he went to buy drinks and snacks. Security footage from a nearby convenience store later revealed what he actually bought: a large kitchen knife, wrapped carefully in brown paper. The cashier remembered him clearly because of how calm and polite he seemed, as though buying an everyday item. It was just past 9 in the morning when he returned to the hotel with a faint smile, holding the secret that would soon destroy both of their lives. They left the city around 10, driving through the winding roads that led toward the mountains. The view was breathtaking, stretches of green valleys, misty ridges, and open skies that looked infinite. Clarisse leaned out the window, laughing as the wind whipped through her hair. She took photos of every turn, posting one final picture of herself with the caption, "Happiest day of my life." To anyone watching online, it seemed like a couple's perfect getaway. But beside her, Ramon's silence deepened with every mile. As they reached the lookout point around noon, there were few tourists around. The area was quiet, surrounded by tall trees and steep drops that opened into vast canyons. Clarisse wanted to walk to the edge to take pictures. She handed her phone to Ramon, asking him to capture the moment. What she didn't know was that he had already hidden the knife in his bag. Witnesses would later recall hearing faint sounds echoing from the cliffs. A struggle, followed by silence. Investigators pieced together the events through forensic evidence. Clarisse had several defensive wounds on her arms and hands, showing she had fought for her life. She was attacked suddenly, likely without warning. Ramon's rage exploded in seconds, and by the time it was over, she lay motionless on the rocky ground. Panic set in as he realized the gravity of what he had done. In a frantic attempt to hide the body, he dragged her into the thick bushes and covered her with leaves and stones. Then he sat down for several minutes, staring blankly into the distance, before driving away as though nothing had happened. When Ramon returned to Sydney, his behavior was eerily calm. He parked the car, went up to their hotel room, and changed clothes. He took a long shower, washing away the traces of blood. Later that evening, he walked into the nearest police station to report his wife missing. He told officers that Clarisse had wandered off during their hike to take photos and never returned. His voice trembled slightly, enough to sound believable. Police immediately launched a search, believing it to be a case of a lost tourist. As night fell, search teams with flashlights and drones combed the area. Volunteers joined in, and news of the missing Filipino honeymooner spread quickly online. Ramon gave interviews, tears in his eyes, pleading for help to find his wife. The public sympathized with him, touched by the image of a heartbroken husband desperate for answers. But behind those tears was the cold reality of a man trying to hide his crime. Back in the hotel room, investigators would later find a chilling clue. Ramon had removed all of Clarisse's belongings from the dresser and neatly folded her clothes into her suitcase, as if preparing for her never to return. On his phone, several messages and call logs had been deleted, including one to a friend he owed money to. His staged concern was already beginning to unravel. The story that had started as a fairy tale honeymoon was now transforming into one of Australia's most shocking murder mysteries, and the husband's mask of innocence was about to crack. As the search for Clarisse entered its second day, the Blue Mountains became the focus of a massive rescue operation. Helicopters hovered over the cliffs, rescue teams climbed through steep trails, and divers searched nearby rivers in hopes of finding any trace of the missing woman. Australian media quickly picked up the story, describing her as a newlywed nurse who had vanished on her honeymoon. Ramon stood before cameras, his voice shaking as he pleaded for anyone with information to come forward. His eyes were red, his tone sorrowful, and his performance convincing enough to fool even experienced officers, at least at first. Detectives began to notice subtle inconsistencies in his story. He claimed that Clarisse had disappeared around 3 in the afternoon, but witnesses remembered seeing him leave the mountain area hours earlier around midday. His account of the hiking route was vague, and he couldn't describe key landmarks. Even the smallest details, what they ate for lunch, how long they spent at each viewpoint, seemed uncertain in his retelling. Still, There was no direct evidence of wrongdoing, and the police continued to treat the case as a missing person investigation. Back at the hotel, forensic technicians began examining the couple's room for clues. The first red flag appeared when they found traces of blood near the bathroom sink. At first, Ramon insisted it was from a shaving cut, but the splatter pattern told a different story. Forensic testing later revealed the blood belonged to Clarisse. Investigators also discovered that Ramon had used the hotel laundry service shortly after returning from the hike, turning in his shirt and trousers with faint reddish stains that staff had assumed were dirt. Meanwhile, detectives obtained surveillance footage from the hotel's lobby and surrounding stores. The footage showed Ramon returning to the hotel alone at 3:02 p.m., much earlier than his claimed timeline. He appeared calm, carrying a small bag and wearing a clean change of clothes. Another camera showed him at a convenience store the same morning, purchasing a large knife wrapped in paper. When questioned about it, he said it was for preparing food during their trip, but that explanation quickly fell apart when no such item was found among their belongings. As the evidence piled up, suspicion grew. Detectives decided to dig deeper into the couple's background. They contacted family members in the Philippines, and what they learned painted a troubling picture. Ramon had borrowed large sums of money in the months leading up to the wedding, telling friends it was for business investments. Several lenders confirmed he was behind on payments. One even claimed he had been threatened days before the wedding for failing to repay his debt. The picture of a happy newlywed husband was crumbling fast. 2 days later, the search ended in tragedy when a group of hikers stumbled upon a body in a wooded area near one of the lookout points. It was Clarisse. Her remains were partially covered by branches, and her jewelry was missing. The post-mortem revealed multiple stab wounds, with evidence of a struggle. The brutality of the attack shocked investigators and confirmed their worst fears. This was no accident or disappearance. It was a deliberate killing. When police confronted Ramon with the discovery, his composure began to fracture. His confident tone wavered, and he started contradicting his earlier statements. Forensic analysis placed him at the exact location where Clarisse's body was found, thanks to soil samples and traces from his shoes. Detectives also recovered deleted text messages from his phone, revealing desperate conversations about money, unpaid debts, and his frustration over his wife's refusal to help financially. Faced with mounting evidence, Ramon's mask of grief finally slipped. During an intense interrogation session that stretched late into the night, he broke down and confessed. The story that spilled from him was cold and calculated. He admitted to buying the knife that morning with the intention of confronting Clarisse. He claimed it was a moment of rage, but investigators believed it was premeditated. The chilling truth was now out. The husband who had appeared heartbroken on television was, in fact, the man responsible for the murder he had pretended to grieve. The shocking revelation sent waves across both Australia and the Philippines. The romantic tale of a Filipino couple on their honeymoon had turned into an international nightmare. What had begun as a missing person search was now a murder investigation, and the man everyone had once pitied was about to face justice for the crime that shattered 2 families and left a nation horrified. Ramon's confession exposed the twisted layers of deception behind the entire marriage. What the world had seen as a fairy tale love story was, in truth, a carefully constructed illusion built on lies, greed, and desperation. During interrogation, he revealed that before their wedding, he had secretly taken out a life insurance policy in Clarisse's name worth millions of pesos, naming himself as the only beneficiary. The policy had been processed through a small insurance company in Manila just weeks before their honeymoon. Investigators discovered that he had paid the first premium using borrowed money, fully intending to cash in after Clarisse's death. The plan was simple but ruthless. Ramon would stage her death as an accident during their honeymoon, perhaps a fall from a cliff or a drowning during a hike. He would return home as a devastated husband, collect the insurance money, and pay off his debts. But the plan began to fall apart when Clarisse started questioning his financial behavior. Days before the trip, she had found strange documents on his laptop, including a copy of the insurance policy bearing her name. Although she hadn't confronted him directly, she grew distant and suspicious. Ramon later told detectives that she had mentioned wanting to end the marriage after returning from Australia. That single statement shattered what little control he had left. In court, prosecutors described the murder as cold-blooded and premeditated. They argued that Ramon had every opportunity to stop himself, but instead chose to carry out a plan that had been brewing for months. Evidence presented during the trial painted a devastating picture. The knife purchase, The deleted messages, the staged disappearance, and the life insurance motive. It became clear that every move he made was calculated. Even his public pleas for help were part of his attempt to mislead investigators and delay suspicion. Clarisse's parents flew from the Philippines to attend the hearings, their grief visible in every appearance. The courtroom was packed daily with journalists, students, and members of the Filipino community living in Sydney. The trial became one of the most closely followed criminal cases of the year. The prosecution presented forensic experts who described the sequence of the attack, showing how Clarisse had tried to defend herself. Her fingernails contained traces of Ramon's DNA, proving that she had struggled until her final breath. The brutality of the act left the courtroom silent. When the defense tried to argue that the killing was a crime of passion, claiming Ramon lost control during a heated argument, the prosecution countered with evidence of planning, the insurance policy, the knife purchase, and the deliberate cover-up. The jury listened closely as the prosecution laid out the timeline from the couple's flight to Australia to the moment Ramon reported Clarisse missing. Each piece of evidence tightened the noose around his story until it completely unraveled. After 3 long weeks, the jury reached a unanimous verdict: guilty of first-degree murder. The judge called the act a betrayal of love, trust, and humanity, sentencing Ramon to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted into tears as the verdict was read. Clarisse's mother sobbed uncontrollably, clutching her daughter's photograph. Her father stood still, his face pale and expressionless, as if drained of all emotion. Ramon sat motionless in the dock, his eyes downcast, showing no sign of remorse. As he was led away in handcuffs, the crowd outside the courthouse shouted angrily, calling him a monster and a coward. News outlets across Asia covered the sentencing live, labeling it the Honeymoon murder case. Back in the Philippines, Clarisse's funeral was held on the same day as Ramon's conviction. Hundreds attended, holding candles and white flowers as her coffin was carried through the church aisle. Her friends remembered her as a woman full of dreams, whose kindness touched everyone she met. The tragedy united both countries in shock and sorrow. For many, it was difficult to comprehend how love could turn into something so dark. Ramon's story became a grim reminder that even those closest to us can harbor unimaginable intentions. In the quiet of his prison cell, stripped of luxury and status, Ramon faced the crushing reality of his actions. The woman who had once trusted him completely was gone forever, and no confession or punishment could ever undo what he had done. In the years following the murder, the story of Ramon and Clarisse Dela Cruz became one of the most haunting and widely discussed true crime cases in both Australia and the Philippines. It wasn't just the brutality of the act that shocked people, it was the betrayal hidden behind the image of a perfect marriage. Their smiling wedding photos and honeymoon videos continued to circulate online, a chilling contrast to the horror that followed. Documentaries, podcasts, and television specials dissected every moment of the case, trying to understand what drove a newlywed husband to destroy the woman he had vowed to protect. Clarisse's family struggled to rebuild their lives after the tragedy. Her parents, once filled with pride for their daughter's accomplishments, now lived with an unending ache. They decided to create something meaningful out of their grief, founding the Clarisse Mendoza Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to helping victims of domestic abuse and financial exploitation. The foundation offered free counseling, legal aid, and community workshops for women. Within a year, it became one of the most recognized support initiatives in Manila, ensuring that Clarisse's name would be remembered not just for her death, but for the lives she continued to inspire. Her funeral had been a national event. Thousands of people attended, many of them strangers moved by her story. The church was filled with white flowers, symbolizing peace and innocence. During the service, her best friend read a letter Clarisse had once written about her dream to care for people in need. That letter became the foundation's guiding mission. Her grave, adorned with photos and candles, became a place where young women came to pray, reflect, and promise themselves they would never ignore the signs of manipulation or emotional abuse. Meanwhile, in Australia, Ramon began serving his life sentence at a maximum security prison outside Sydney. Reports from prison officials described him as a quiet inmate who kept mostly to himself. He spent his days reading, cleaning, and writing letters that he sent to no one. Some said he wrote as a form of repentance, others believed it was just another attempt to portray himself as remorseful. A few years after his conviction, an Australian journalist managed to secure an interview with him. Sitting behind the glass partition, Ramon appeared older, thinner, and hollow-eyed. He admitted that greed had consumed him, that the pressure to appear successful had driven him to destroy the only person who truly loved him. His words sounded sincere, but for those who had followed the case, they felt too late and too empty. The documentary based on the case became a global hit, titled The Honeymoon Deception. It opened with home videos of Ramon and Clarisse laughing during their wedding preparations, a painful reminder of how quickly happiness can turn into horror. The program explored themes of hidden debts, pride, and toxic control. Psychologists interviewed for the show described Ramon as a man who valued image over emotion, someone who equated love with ownership. The story resonated with audiences around the world, not only as a crime but as a lesson about the hidden dangers of financial and emotional manipulation in relationships. Years later, Clarisse's younger sister became a nurse like her, fulfilling her late sister's dream of helping others abroad. She often spoke at events about domestic abuse, urging people to look beyond appearances and pay attention to warning signs. She told audiences that Clarisse had been too trusting, too hopeful, and that love should never require silence or sacrifice in the face of fear. Her speeches went viral online, turning the family's pain into purpose. In the end, the case of Ramon and Clarisse Dela Cruz became more than just a crime story. It became a symbol of how love, when built on lies and greed, can turn into tragedy. Ramon would grow old behind bars, haunted by the memory of the woman he destroyed. Clarisse, on the other hand, would live on through every life her story touched. Every woman who found the courage to leave an unsafe relationship, and every voice that refused to be silenced. Their story serves as a warning that even the most beautiful beginnings can conceal darkness. What started as a celebration of love ended as a cautionary tale of betrayal. The photographs of their smiling faces remain frozen in time, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who promises forever.